Good evening. Yes, it's evening, and welcome to the Social Work Race. It is 9:30 at night, and I am recording this podcast. It's been a while since I've done a speaking to the mic kind of podcast. I have tried to stay on it. It's real challenging, but I love doing this still. But it's just a matter of squeezing in the time to do it. First of all, again, this is how can I put it? There's been some interesting evolutions and developments. Interesting developments. That's more the word I want to use. Where the social work race is really impacting because we're doing a lot of live sessions on Instagram, and I've been using some of the material, as you've probably been aware, on there to upload onto my podcast platform. I've been away this weekend, been to visit my dad who lives quite far up north, and just driven back, done all we've got to do, prepared for the morning, and it's like downtime now. So it's 9:30 at night, it's downtime, and I am now recording. And I record now, straight to my phone, as I told you, because I'm keeping it simple, transfer it to my laptop, and then I maybe will add some music and then upload for you all and take out all the coughing and all the hiccups as well. So here we are. I wanted to bring to you an interesting topic that, if you are reflective enough, you can allow this topic to influence your practice more as a whole. And it's about the language that we use. And so the question was brought up at work: can we call a child a prostitute? And now that question came up as a result of a broader discussion. And so I thought, every time I have these discussions at work, what do? I pull out my Google Drive and I just start typing topics in for podcast discussion, because I know that these topics are key for our development. Absolutely. Excuse me as I sniff. So it's chilly. I've been away. The house isn't quite warm enough, and so I'm sniffing away. And so here we are. The question, can we call a child a prostitute? When I was, it wasn't too long ago, a few years ago, the term would be used. The term would be used, child prostitute. And I don't need to describe what that means because it makes sense to you. Logically, it means that, we have to say it, because if I'm not frank here and then you go to practice and see that we have to use very raw language at times. And language cannot always be politically correct or pretty. It can't. It's got to be very raw, because we're doing raw work and we have to use raw terms sometimes to get to the root of things. So it's when a child is selling their body in the form of sexual favors in return for something. Yeah. And do I have cases like that? I've had cases like that, yes. Absolutely. I've worked with cases like that for years, and I've spoken about it on a previous podcast, where especially young girls, I've had one or two boys, but it's much more that the girls are doing it in various amounts, in various ways, trying to fit in, maybe for a bit of money. But I've not had girls do it for money. I've only had girls do it because they want to either fit in or they're doing it for drugs. I've not had girls having sex with boys or men for any other reason. Probably more so to fit in. And that is the route that they find that they're being used to be exploited. That's my literal experiences. And to try and convince them that way of life is there's no good end to it is very difficult. And some of these 12, 13, 14-year-old girls, 15, 16, 17 years old, sorry, I've really struggled to get them to believe that they don't need to do that. They are so emotionally and mentally bonded to the practice of feeling that that selling themselves is it's so ingrained in their behavior. They don't see any other value system, and to try and put value in a young lady or a young man is difficult. And that's why I say working with young people is the most difficult form of work. And I'm encouraging you as social workers to think of ways and to build relationships to really undo those knots. Especially if you work in youth justice, you will find this. Depends where you work. So can I call, excuse the sniffing, can I call a child a prostitute? And why would I be asking that question? I mean, if an adult is having sex or using sex as a means to make gains, that's prostitution. So when someone who is under the age of 18 does it, isn't that a child prostitute? So I went to an interesting website. Let me see if we can go there now. Sharedhope.org. Although, can we go there? Yeah, we can. Lovely. Although the media, and this is what they say on sharedhope.org, although the media will tell you otherwise, child prostitutes do not exist in America. What do you mean? America's a challenging country, right? So how can we say America doesn't have this problem? Well, it says, however, prostituted children do exist. The difference is a question. A child cannot be a prostitute because he or she is a victim of commercial sexual exploitation, and the federal law defines this child as a victim of sex. You see that? It's so important for us to recognize language. And it says here, the difference in language is critical. If we are to make progress in national efforts to rescue and restore child victims of sex trafficking, we'll come back to this. We will come back to this. Why? I'll explain. I'm going to another website for you. And it's called theimpactor.com. IMPAKTER.com. And it looks at child prostitution in France. There's an article there. In 2021, it's child prostitution in France is part of a broader phenomena. This is a very interesting article, okay? Excuse me. Yep, like I said, it's chilly here. The French government unveils... Oh, no, come on. No, come on. Look, it's asking me to join our website. I don't want to join our website. The French government unveils a 14 million euro plan to tackle the issue of child prostitution. But it says worldwide efforts must be done to mitigate this threat to children. Now, I'm going to read some of this to you because it kind of didn't quite blow me away, but it really opened my eyes further. Okay, it says child prostitution in France took on the headlines this week after the Secretary of State, Adrian Taquet, told a press conference that at least 7,000 to 10,000 children were affected by this growing phenomenon. It is believed that in 5 years, the number of victims of child prostitution in the French territory has increased by 70%. They're using the term child prostitution. But there's a reason why I use this article, because it uses the title child prostitution, but it does understand that it's really exploitation. This is where we're going, okay? But what I wanted to do as we go through this article is just explore something underlying the title and the notion of child prostitution so that we can understand why language needs to change and what we need to look for, okay? He emphasized in a statement that whilst most of the victims usually pertains to 16 to 17 age cohort, half of them, mostly girls but also boys, entered prostitution at 14. This comes as a surprise, as research focusing on Euro-American countries have associated child prostitution with much older children. The victims were said to belong to all social backgrounds. Think about this, guys. All social backgrounds, but affected minors were found to have shared similar problems. Gets deep. Often having been victims of or confronted with violence, particularly within the family. If you know, I wish I could tell you where I work. I don't say it in public. But where I work, it's DV and it's abuse. It's DV and it's abuse. It's DV, domestic abuse, domestic violence, and sexual abuse. Lots of alcohol thrown in that as well. That's what we get. And I guess this is a wake-up call to really shake up parents to understand where their behavior is leading their children. Yeah. Yeah, I have to pause on that. And that's what I wanted to bring up. The victims belong to all social groups, and it's domestic violence is a massive feature. We haven't even spoken about the exploitation from the gangs and the gang culture, and I use the term gang apprehensively. But I guess the culture where the elders are convincing young girls and grooming them to partake in these sexual acts in return for drugs, not caring that they have brought them into a path that is difficult to get off, convincing them that this is the way forward and this is where their only value lies. That's a heavy weight. Now, for those of you who are students or already in this game, if you're a student, get ready to be receiving a heavy weight of caseload. And I say heavyweight, meaning one of these cases can really take you. If you are an empath, someone who takes on the feelings of others deeply, then this is going to be challenging for you. But you can do it because it needs you. This situation needs your empathy. Try not to run away from it. We can't see them as prostitutes, but we've got to see them as victims of prostitution or children who are being exploited even until the hour before their birthday. Let's change our language, because then language, in my opinion, leads change. It starts with what we think and then what we say, and then we can make changes in the system. The other thing about language, and it goes right back to the beginning, can we call a child a prostitute? The language adultifies them and removes them from the child that they are into adulthood. And this happens in various ways, in various different demographics and genders and so forth. We have to be careful about our language and remember that if we are working with children and families and children, we must see them as, and we are required to by law, to see them and treat them as children. Now, I'm going to throw something in here because I'll do a live on this. That's why I had a concern about Shamima Begum, because she was a child. It doesn't matter what they do, they're children. And if they're being exploited, we have to surround them and protect them and treat them as children and work with them until they're adults. That's what the system does. And that's what we need to do with our language, so that they recognize and that we recognize that they're our children. Thanks for listening. In fact, before I end, just, changing of language means change of mindset, change of culture. It's not easy. And when you get deeper into, meetings, listen to what everyone says. The system is changing. It may not be changing fast enough, but it's very difficult to change culture with such a mixed community, with different skill sets and different institutions. It's not easy. It will happen if we are just relentless, in a strategy meeting or a professionals meeting, you'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 people there. If one of us uses the right language, we are impacting 7. And each one of those 7 knows at least one other person, and that's 14, right? So we can make waves. Just bear in mind what you're doing and why you're doing it. And remember that the language is key. to making change. Yeah, so thank you for listening, and I hope it made sense. If you have any other topics that you want to discuss, let me know on thesocialworkrace@gmail.com. Otherwise, stay close to, yes, my TikTok. But if you want to see the live discussions, get me on Instagram Mondays and Wednesdays. It's most Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. and join the discussion. Take care of yourselves.